So today I'm joined by the wonderful Bee MacPherson to talk about the importance of female leadership and leaders in championing menopause awareness in the workplace. Hi, Bee.
Good afternoon, Mel. Thank you for inviting me to talk with you.
Oh, pleasure. So I know your role is Associate Professor of Clinical Education at the School of Medicine at University of Leeds, and you've done a lot of work. I guess you've led on the gender equality work within Leeds Medical School. So how did you get into the menopause space and menopause awareness space? What happened?
Yeah, well, what happened, Mel, was when I was 42, a consultant said to me, "This, Mrs. MacPherson, I'm afraid is the start of the end for you." And yeah, I think my eyebrows kind of hit my hairline.
Uh-huh.
And that's 11 years ago. I'm 53 now. And I think I thought at the time, well, that's okay. I was lucky I'd had a family. I didn't want any more family. I thought, as a qualified health professional, I understood a bit about menopause. I thought, well, I'm young, I'm fit, I'm healthy. And I just thought, I wasn't bothered. I thought, well, it'll be an easy transition for me.
Mhm.
But the reality was really quite different, Mel, with a range of physical, physiological, and at times psychological perimenopausal symptoms that
Yeah.
really left me quite isolated and alone, because at that time, 11 years ago, no one seemed to be talking about it. There was no general conversation about it.
Mm.
So I felt quite isolated and alone, really at quite at odds with myself. But I thought, I cannot be the only person in this organisation to be feeling like this.
Mm.
So I had to put on my really, my brave warrior face, because I felt I was going to make myself vulnerable. And I'm sure you know, as a female leader, that's not necessarily easy to make yourself vulnerable.
No.
But my desire to make things better for people was only slightly greater than my fear of how vulnerable I might be making myself.
Yeah.
So I agendered it as a health and wellbeing issue for staff, and really it's grown from there.
And what sort of have you been running awareness for certain groups of colleagues, or is it all colleagues?
All colleagues, Mel, everybody is welcome, irrespective of age or gender. I think we need to bust the myth that menopause happens to old women like you and I. I was younger than average, but certainly not the youngest. We will have colleagues who suffer primary ovarian insufficiency, colleagues who have an enforced menopause because of perhaps cancer treatments or surgical treatments.
Yeah, of
It's not
course.
just women, our non-binary colleagues, trans men may suffer some debilitating symptoms at times. Although I have no wish to pathologise menopause, Mel, is a natural transition, not necessarily an easy transition for some people. So
Yeah.
yes, everybody is welcome, irrespective of age or gender. We do workshops for staff, workshops for managers. We have a peer support network. Yeah, we have guidance, and latterly been working on support for students, because we have a very diverse
Yeah.
student population,
Yeah.
and support for colleagues who support those students as well.
And that's quite interesting because I guess most people wouldn't think, well, why do students need awareness around
Mm.
menopause? But as you've said, it can happen at any age, right?
Yeah.
And also, those students have mothers and colleagues and family members who may be going through this as well. So it is
Mm.
important, really, to educate those young colleagues as well, isn't it? Those young people in our workplaces, or that we engage with.
Yeah, I mean, it's for everybody. Everybody needs to understand.
Mm.
I think people might think, well, why are we talking about menopause now? Haven't women always menopaused? Well, yes, of course we have, but we're living our lives really differently.
Yeah, of course.
Far more older women are working. We're living larger portion of our lives without those essential hormones. Like
Yeah.
you say, everybody will know somebody, a mother, a lover, a sister, somebody who might be experiencing a difficult time.
Yeah.
Younger people might be line managing older people who are, struggling with perimenopausal symptoms. So yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. We need to be educating absolutely everybody.
Absolutely. And I think, hopefully in 10, 20 years' time, we won't need to be talking about this so much because we'll all be much more well educated and be ready and empowered to cope with it. But we're not quite there yet, are we? And I guess one of the reasons I really wanted to speak to you, B, was when we met a month or so ago, we were having a chat about the importance of female leaders in, I guess, spearheading menopause in their organizations and really stepping up and getting it on the agenda. And I know you shared with me a couple of instances where you'd met leaders who felt really worried about doing that. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing a wee bit about that.
Yeah, so not just within my organisation, but out with as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard very senior females saying things like, "Oh, we can't talk about menopause, it'll make women seem weak."
Hmm.
I've heard women talking about feeling shame about the way they feel because of their symptoms, shame about the treatment choices they make or the treatments they choose not to have.
Yeah.
Um, I think, well, I know of women who were uncomfortable about admitting they're over 50 for the
Hmm.
fear of judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sadly, I mean, I feel quite disappointed myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Personally, I'm thinking being in my 50s is the best decade so far. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm lying. No, I get it. I think we all feel a bit more comfortable in our own skin. Well, we do, but I've also met quite a lot of senior female leaders who I think they've worked really, really hard to get on the board or in their senior leadership
yeah,
position, and they feel like it could be perceived as weakness or a woman's issue. And why we're talking about this at the SLT,
yeah.
this is not what we should be doing.
But
So
do you
is it?
think, oh, sorry.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, do you think it's is the cause of that discomfort that we need to, if we view it within a context of a society that values youth,
Mm,
yeah, and then it can stigmatize menopause as a sign of aging. And I also think that sometimes, perhaps, if women work in quite a male dominated environment, perhaps they feel that they're expected to be like their male colleagues.
yeah.
Therefore, we cannot show any sign of weakness because that's not acceptable. But
Mm,
actually, I think as female leaders, Mel, we can be like the steel feather. I like to think of it as a steel feather, so we can both be soft, but actually have a clear voice at the same time. And
mm.
I really believe that we can show strength through vulnerability.
Yeah, I think that does take courage. I mean, going back to what you've just said, I think some of the female leaders I've encountered who are not as vocal about this feel like I could be jeopardizing my career. So they're not feeling psychologically as safe as they might. And they feel like they've got to work harder than some of their male counterparts to be at the table. However, saying that, I've met some brilliant senior female leaders who have said, this is an issue. Right now, I see my colleagues of all levels suffering and not really getting any support, and we have to get it on the agenda. It's like any other well-being topic, we wouldn't just ignore mental health issues or somebody's physical health issues. It's something we need to be aware of and we need to have our arms around. And they're almost saying, grow up, this is a fact of life. It's a natural transition we've got to navigate. And as leaders, you've got to be aware enough to support effectively.
Well, we've got a responsibility, haven't we? Like you say, I think if somebody came to me and said, I've been diagnosed with diabetes or,
Mm.
I'm struggling with my mental health, the conversation would be no different than somebody who came and said, I'm struggling with a range of perimenopausal symptoms. I think it's reflective of a lack of understanding
Mm.
um, or awareness about women's health per se. And I just think people get upscuttled. If you think you're going to talk about women's health and you're going to say periods or vaginas, that people just get upscuttled and don't want to talk about it. So I agree, it should just be normalised and it shouldn't be taboo and should be part of the health and wellbeing agenda. Because at the
Well,
end of the day,
mm,
many of the women, although we've already established it's not just women, of over 40, say, who are experiencing menopause, but many of the people who are experiencing menopause are really skilled, knowledgeable people who we
yeah,
don't want to lose from the workforce. Yet we know the impact is that about 10% will leave because they feel like they can't cope.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, right now we've got a huge hole in our bucket, right? And actually, if an organization cares about being diverse, representing different voices, and retaining absolutely brilliant people, then this is an issue that has to be talked about. So I guess a question, I'd love to know your perspective on this, Bee. If we are trying to get those senior female leaders to step up and be role models, or any thoughts or ideas about how we can sort of encourage them to do that?
So he asked me about female leaders. I'll come to that. But of course, it's not just female leaders, it's
No, no.
collaboration across all genders. But I
Yeah.
think what we need is female leaders to role model and show that strength through vulnerability.
Mm,
But we need but for enable female leaders to do that, we need to develop cultures of safety.
mm-hmm.
And to enable them to do that role model, I think we need self-leadership. So we need to educate ourselves so
Yeah.
then we can educate everybody else. But what we need is appropriate pedagogy that acknowledges the complexity of menopause and the potential impact that it can have on our colleagues. Everyone within an organisation needs to understand the potential impact. You mentioned equity and progression. It's really, really key for that. I
Mm,
think that I mentioned the steel feather earlier, but I think exceptional leaders treat people with dignity and respect. So it's about
yeah.
listening to everyone's voice. It's about trying to understand and not be dismissive of others' experience. I think sometimes people can mistake kindness for weakness, but I think some of those female or sometimes seen as female traits, so the kindness, the empathy, the collaboration, the integrity, they're actual strengths, and we as female leaders should be should be embracing those. And our other colleagues, our male colleagues, colleagues of other genders, actually, in terms of everyone having a voice and promoting diversity and equity, accepting and welcoming those perhaps different energies and perspectives, at that leadership table. But I think our colleagues, well, we all have a responsibility to create that culture of safety where female leaders are enabled and supported to do that work. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
No, it makes total sense. And, I think sometimes we stereotype some of those traits to women as well. I mean, I know some women who are really empathetic in that I'm going to put myself in your shoes, but I'm also no nonsense.
Yeah,
You know,
steel feathers. They're steel
let's
feathers.
grow up and let's talk about this like adults.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, and I've done a couple of videos already with male leaders because they've got such an important voice and an important role in partnership with women. Sometimes, from my experience, it's the male leaders who are breaking through. They're the ones who are pushing it on the agenda. So I think that's wonderful and I want it to continue. But how do we encourage some of those female senior leaders who've probably had to adapt to survive and do as well as they have so that they can be a bit more vulnerable? And I guess I don't know, I guess if we had the answer to that we'd be
We'd be laughing.
we would be laughing. Yeah.
But I think I certainly don't feel the need to share certain personal stuff about my experience in detail. I think if female leaders know that they can have a really strong voice, but they don't actually have to share stuff that they're not comfortable with sharing. It's not necessarily about really personal stuff.
Yeah.
So when I as a health professional, I don't have any qualms about talking about some of the perhaps more difficult stuff to talk about menopause. But I'm not just talking about me, but I'm saying that this might affect 3 out of 4 women,
Yeah.
and actually the impact of this can be quite far reaching. So we need to understand and talk about this. And if we understand about it and talk about it, normalize that conversation, then it just becomes part of the culture.
Yeah. It's amazing to me, and I'm going to wrap it up because I know we wanted to keep this short and sweet today, but it's amazing to me. I think one of the things we still think is everybody knows a lot about this. And we think just because somebody's a woman, they're really well educated and empowered about it. And I think that's where the work we do is really important because actually some of the people who are least educated are women on this.
Mhm.
And they can take the ostrich position. I don't know about you. When I was 40, I didn't really want to think about the menopause. I was like, I was going to keep it at bay as long as possible. It wasn't comfortable to me to think about that. That meant old. It meant, which as we know now, it's not true, but there's a lot of baggage to it. And actually, some of the female leaders who've been through my programs have said, I had a lot of these symptoms and I didn't connect it to menopause. right? As you've had that as well. And it's like, how do we build that knowledge so that people are empowered? Because I would like us to be out of a job in 10 years' time where we don't need to talk about this anymore.
Yeah.
Um, any last thoughts, Bee, before we sign off today?
Oh, well, my last thoughts, I was going to, sorry, because I know you want to wrap it up, but I think you're absolutely right. It's about all colleagues understanding. So if we understand what these hormones do for us, we can then understand some of the signs and symptoms people are experiencing and the impact that that can have on their quality of personal and professional life. We can then put support in place so we don't lose these amazing people from the workforce. And if we do that, Mel, it won't just benefit female leaders, it'll benefit everybody within their organisation, for, you know, shared understanding, inclusion, belonging, equity and progression. It benefits everybody.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to stop. It's
Okay.
been a pleasure to see you, Bee, and I'm sure we'll
Thank
be
you.
having many more conversations. So
I
thanks for
hope so.
sharing. Well, thanks for
Yeah.
coming to speak to me on International Women's Day. And I know we wanted to talk about this topic today. And if you are a woman out there listening to this video, just think about, what's my role? If you're a female senior leader, how can I help get this on the agenda if it's not quite there yet? Um, Thanks very much. I'll speak to you
Well,
soon.
take
Take
care.
care.